Men, emotional instability doesn't always look like dramatic meltdowns, constant crying, or obvious chaos. The most dangerous type of emotional instability is the kind that's carefully hidden beneath a calm exterior, a pleasant personality, or a seemingly well-adjusted life. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Red flag 1. Her past relationships all ended dramatically or suddenly. When you learn that every past relationship she's had ended with major drama, sudden breakups, or extreme circumstances, but she tells these stories calmly, as though she's completely moved past them, most men focus on the fact that she seems stable now, rather than recognizing the pattern. It's actually revealing that emotional chaos follows her from relationship to relationship, and the calm presentation is temporary mask that will eventually crack. What this red flag actually reveals, this pattern reveals, she's the common factor in relationship drama that keeps repeating. When someone has multiple relationships that all ended dramatically, the problem isn't that she's unlucky or keeps choosing wrong partners. The problem is her. She creates or contributes to dramatic endings because of emotional instability that she's temporarily managing in front of you, but that inevitably emerges in relationships. Notice how she describes these dramatic endings. If every story involves her being wronged, betrayed, or driven to extreme reactions by terrible partners, she takes no accountability for the chaos. If she frames dramatic endings as evidence of her passion or intensity, rather than recognizing them as dysfunctional, she's romanticized instability. If she tells these stories with disturbing calm, she's dissociated from the emotional reality of the chaos she's created. Watch what specific types of drama characterized past relationships. If they ended with explosive fights, that's anger regulation problems. If they involved her threatening to leave, or actually leaving suddenly, that's relationship instability and poor impulse control. If they included dramatic scenes, public confrontations, or involving other people, that's boundary issues and emotional dysregulation that creates chaos in multiple life areas. Pay attention to whether there's any pattern of stability anywhere in her relationship history. If she's never maintained a calm, healthy relationship that ended mutually and maturely, she's incapable of stable partnerships. If even friendships have ended dramatically, the instability affects all relationships, not just romantic ones. The absence of any stable relationship history is a massive red flag. Observe whether she's done any work to address patterns. If she's been in therapy, worked on emotional regulation, or taken responsibility for her contribution to past chaos, there's at least awareness and effort. If she's done nothing to address why all relationships end dramatically, but expects different results with you, she's brought the same instability into your relationship and is just temporarily suppressing it. Notice if she warns you that relationships are hard for her, or if she presents herself as having learned from past experiences. If she warns you subtly that she's difficult in relationships, but frames it as quirky personality rather than serious instability, she's telling you problems are coming while minimizing them. If she claims to have learned, but shows no evidence of actual change, learning is just narrative she's adopted without doing the work. Why this reveals hidden instability. Dramatic relationship endings reveal emotional instability that she's currently managing to hide from you. The calm presentation you're seeing is temporary. Eventually, the same patterns that destroyed previous relationships will emerge in yours. She's showing you her relationship trajectory. Things seem fine initially, then instability emerges, then everything ends dramatically. You're currently in the phase where things seem fine, but the dramatic ending is already predictable based on her pattern. Red flag 2, she has significantly different personalities in different contexts. When you notice she acts completely differently, depending on who she's with or what situation she's in. With personality shifts that go beyond normal social adjustment, most men either don't notice because they only see her in limited contexts, or they rationalize it as her being adaptable. It's actually revealing she doesn't have stable sense of self and adopts whatever personality seems most advantageous, which is common in certain personality disorders and emotional instability. What this red flag actually reveals. This pattern reveals identity disturbance and lack of stable core self. Women with severe emotional instability often don't have consistent personality across contexts because their sense of who they are shifts based on who they're with and what they want from the situation. They're not adapting their behavior slightly for different contexts. They're becoming different people because they don't have stable internal identity. Notice the degree of personality shift between contexts. Normal people adjust communication style and emphasis on different personality aspects in different situations. Unstable people become completely different versions of themselves. If the woman you're with around her friends seems like an entirely different person than the woman you're with alone, that's not normal social adjustment. That's identity instability. Watch what aspects of personality shift most dramatically. If her values seem to change based on who she's talking to, she doesn't have genuine core values. If her interests shift to match whoever she's with, she's mirroring rather than being authentic. If her communication style, humor, and entire presentation change dramatically, she's performing different characters rather than expressing consistent self. Pay attention to whether she seems aware of the shifts or if they're unconscious. If she deliberately adjusts her presentation for different audiences, that's manipulation and inauthenticity. If the shifts seem automatic and she doesn't recognize she's different in different contexts, it's deeper identity disturbance where she genuinely doesn't have stable sense of who she is. Observe which version of her seems most genuine. Often, the version she presents when she's not trying to impress anyone or achieve specific goals is closest to authentic self. If you can't identify which version is real, because they all seem equally performed, she might not have authentic self beneath the presentations. She might be a collection of personas without stable core identity. Notice whether the personality shifts align with what different people want from her. If she becomes fun party girl around friends who value that, serious professional around work colleagues, and perfect girlfriend around you, she's adopting personalities that get approval in each context. This approval seeking through personality shifting reveals she's measuring worth through external validation rather than having internal stable identity. Why this reveals? Hidden instability. Identity disturbance reveals fundamental emotional instability. When someone doesn't have stable sense of self, they can't provide stable relationship because they change based on internal emotional states and external pressures. You're never dealing with consistent partner. You're dealing with different versions who emerge unpredictably. This creates relationship where you can't know who you're actually with because she doesn't know who she is. Red flag 3, she's either completely isolated or surrounded by drama-filled relationships. When you notice she either has no close relationships at all beyond surface-level acquaintances, or every relationship in her life is filled with conflict and drama. Most men focus on the individual explanations she gives for each situation rather than seeing the overall pattern. It's actually revealing she either pushes everyone away to avoid intimacy that triggers instability, or she creates chaos in all relationships because instability is her baseline operating mode. What this red flag actually reveals: this pattern reveals inability to maintain healthy relationships with anyone, not just romantic partners. Emotional instability doesn't only affect romantic relationships, it affects all relationships. Women who are deeply unstable either isolate to avoid the vulnerability that triggers their dysfunction, or they create constant drama with everyone in their lives because they can't regulate emotions or handle normal relationship challenges. Notice the quality of her existing relationships. If she has no close friends, no family contact, and no meaningful connections, she's either been cut off by everyone because of her behavior, or she's isolated herself because intimacy triggers her instability. If she has relationships, but they're all characterized by frequent fights, conflicts, and dramatic episodes, she creates chaos wherever she goes. Watch how she explains the isolation or drama. If she has no relationships and blames everyone else for abandoning her, she takes no responsibility for patterns that push people away. If she's surrounded by drama and frames herself as victim of everyone else's chaos, she doesn't recognize she's the common factor creating the dysfunction. Lack of accountability for relationship patterns is itself a sign of instability. Pay attention to whether she seeks therapy or help for relationship difficulties. If she recognizes that isolation or constant drama is a problem and actively works on it through therapy, there's at least awareness and effort. If she accepts isolation or drama as normal and does nothing to address patterns, she's comfortable with dysfunction or doesn't recognize how abnormal her relationship life is. Observe how she handles any conflicts that arise between you. If someone who has no stable relationships or only dramatic relationships shows early signs of creating same patterns with you, that's confirmation the instability is transferring to your relationship. If she can't handle minor disagreements without excessive emotion, or if she immediately threatens relationship when challenged, her instability is already affecting you. Notice whether she seems to fear abandonment or court it. Some unstable women push people away before they can be abandoned, while others desperately cling and create drama trying to prevent abandonment. Either pattern reveals deep attachment wounds and emotional instability that makes healthy relationships impossible without significant therapeutic work. Why this reveals hidden instability. Inability to maintain healthy relationships with anyone reveals pervasive emotional dysfunction. If someone can't sustain friendships, family connections, or work relationships without drama or complete isolation, romantic relationships won't be different. You're seeing evidence that she's incapable of healthy relating in any context, which guarantees your relationship will eventually be characterized by the same patterns destroying or preventing all her other connections. Red flag 4. She has extremely rigid or extremely absent boundaries. When you notice she either has very rigid rules about everything with inflexible expectations and harsh consequences for violations, or she has essentially no boundaries at all and allows anything. Most men think rigid boundaries mean she has high standards, and absent boundaries mean she's easygoing. It's actually revealing emotional dysregulation that manifests as either excessive control to manage internal chaos or complete boundary collapse because she can't maintain healthy limits. What this red flag actually reveals. This pattern reveals inability to establish and maintain healthy, flexible boundaries. Emotionally stable people have clear boundaries. They can communicate and enforce while also being flexible when situations warrant it. Unstable people have either extremely rigid boundaries they use as control mechanisms to manage internal chaos, or no boundaries because they can't maintain structure in their emotional life. Notice whether her boundaries seem about protecting well-being or controlling environment. Healthy boundaries protect yourself from genuine harm. Unhealthy, rigid boundaries attempt to control other people's behavior to prevent any situation that might trigger emotional dysregulation. If her rules seem designed to prevent normal life situations that might upset her, she's using boundaries as control mechanism rather than protection. Watch what happens when boundaries are challenged or crossed. If she has rigid boundaries and they're violated, does she respond proportionally or does she escalate to extreme reactions? If she has no boundaries and is consistently hurt or taken advantage of, does she learn to establish limits or does she continue accepting mistreatment? Either extreme reveals inability to handle boundaries in healthy, flexible way. Pay attention to whether boundaries are consistent or change based on emotional state. If her limits shift dramatically when she's in different moods, the boundaries aren't actual values she's protecting. They're expressions of current emotional state. If what's acceptable changes constantly based on how she feels, you're dealing with instability masquerading as boundaries. Observe whether she respects other people's boundaries. If she has rigid boundaries but doesn't respect yours, she believes her needs override everyone else's. If she has no boundaries for herself but judges others for having limits, she resents people who can maintain structure she can't. Either pattern reveals self-centered approach to relationships and boundaries. Notice whether boundaries create safety or control dynamic. Healthy boundaries make both people feel safe and respected. Unhealthy boundaries create power dynamic where one person controls relationship through strict rules or where one person has all the power because the other has no limits. If boundary dynamics make you feel controlled, or if you feel responsible for her because she won't protect herself, boundaries are dysfunctional. Why this reveals hidden instability. Boundary dysfunction reveals emotional instability because boundaries require emotional regulation to establish and maintain appropriately. Rigid boundaries are an attempt to control external environment because internal emotional environment is chaotic. Absent boundaries are a result of inability to maintain any structure. Either extreme predicts relationship where you either walk on eggshells avoiding her triggers, or you constantly rescue her from situations her lack of boundaries creates. Red flag 5. She self-medicates with substances, shopping, or other compulsive behaviors. When you notice she uses alcohol frequently to manage stress, shops excessively when upset, engages in compulsive behaviors, or has other patterns of using external things to regulate emotions, most men either participate in these activities with her or dismiss them as normal stress relief. It's actually revealing she lacks internal emotional regulation and requires external substances or behaviors to manage feelings she can't handle on her own. What this red flag actually reveals. This pattern reveals inability to self-soothe or regulate emotions through healthy internal mechanisms. Emotionally stable people can manage difficult feelings through internal processing, healthy coping skills, and appropriate support seeking. Unstable people require external regulation through substances, compulsive behaviors, or other maladaptive coping because they never developed capacity for emotional self-management. Notice what specifically she uses to regulate emotions. If it's alcohol or substances, she's chemically altering her emotional state because she can't tolerate feeling sober. If it's shopping or spending, she's using acquisition to fill emotional voids or distract from uncomfortable feelings. If it's food, exercise, or other behaviors taken to compulsive levels, she's using those activities to avoid or numb emotions she can't process. Watch the pattern and frequency. Occasional drinking or shopping isn't concerning. Regular pattern where she consistently turns to specific substances or behaviors whenever she's stressed, upset, or struggling reveals she has no other coping mechanisms. If you can predict that certain emotional states will trigger specific behaviors, she's stuck in pattern of external regulation. Pay attention to whether she can handle difficult emotions without turning to these coping mechanisms. If she can't sit with sadness, anxiety, or stress without immediately reaching for something to change how she feels, she's emotionally immature and unstable. If she panics when her usual coping mechanisms aren't available, she's dependent on them for basic emotional functioning. Observe whether she recognizes these patterns as problematic or frames them as normal. If she acknowledges she drinks too much when stressed or spends compulsively to feel better and she's working on healthier coping, there's at least awareness. If she defends the behaviors as deserved treats or normal stress relief despite negative consequences, she's in denial about maladaptive coping. Notice what happens when you're not available to distract her from difficult emotions. If you become one of her emotional regulation tools, where she needs your attention or presence to feel okay, you're being used as external coping mechanism, just like substances or shopping. If she can't be alone with difficult feelings without crisis, she lacks fundamental capacity for emotional self-management. Why this reveals hidden instability. Self-medication and compulsive behaviors reveal fundamental emotional instability. These are not just bad habits. They're evidence of inability to regulate emotions internally. When someone requires external substances or behaviors to manage feelings, they lack the emotional maturity and stability necessary for healthy relationships. As relationship stress inevitably occurs, her reliance on maladaptive coping will intensify, and you'll deal with consequences of her inability to handle emotions in healthy ways.